You are listening to the Cattle Call Podcast. This is the place where computer-aided design and drafting meets humor and practicality, with a touch of business acumen thrown in for fun. Jim and Rocco, the owners of Zentech Consultants, the premier U.S. technology consulting firm for architecture, engineering, construction, and manufacturing, discuss the fascinating world of CAD with some humor and some honesty. The Cattle Call Podcast. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Cattle Call Podcast with Jim and Rocco from Zentech Consultants. I am Jim, your undeniably charming host, and with me, as always, is my partner,
the more charming host, Rocco.
Okay, the delusional host,
Definitely.
Rocco. Nobody's more charming than me. And because you say things
See,
like that, Rocco, you know what that means. It means I have to torture you and put you through the engineering joke of the week. You ready?
Ready.
Ready. Why did the computer engineer quit his job?
Why?
Because he lost his drive. Huh? Yeah.
Oh,
and that fits in well for today's show. Because today we have a return guest on the show. We have Jeff Perry, leadership and development expert and host of the Engineering Career Coach podcast, is here once again with us today. So, Jeff, thanks for being, living dangerously and coming back on the show, man.
Yeah, I mean, I think I sent you an email to say, hey, maybe we should laugh again together. So it's always fun time talking with y'all.
Yeah, except when I tell a joke. Nobody laughs when I tell us.
Yeah, I tried to hold that back.
Yes, I could see. He's laughing on the inside. All right. So Jeff is here today because we want to talk to him about a new book that he has just released, and it is called The Intentional Engineer. And Jeff was kind enough to share a digital copy of the book with both Rocco and I. And I wanted to talk about some of the concepts in the book because I think there's some very important stuff there, not just for engineers, but really I think for any professional to kind of look at when they're considering their own professional lives. So Jeff, why don't we start with, giving the people a little bit of background on what you do and how you got there, and then we'll get into the book.
Yeah, well, I'm excited to talk about this. Just a quick background. I come from a mechanical and software engineering background and then engineering leadership. And then for the last few years, I've gotten into coaching, training, speaking, and now authoring for leadership and career development for engineers and technology professionals. And so writing this book was kind of an act of love to say, because a lot of the work I do, especially in the coaching realm, is around helping people get clear on what they really care about, and be intentional has been a key word for how to do that instead of just being kind of reactive in how we live our careers and lives. And so this is an opportunity to put down a lot of things I've been writing and talking and coaching people on and do that. The other side of the work that I do a lot of development work, especially around team and organizational engagement, employee engagement with teams and organizations. And so I call that engineered engagement to help teams improve there, which if we improve engagement, that improves our productivity, innovation, and creativity, and a number of other elements there. So I get to do that work with groups and organizations. But we're talking today to how do we help individuals be more intentional about what they're doing here. So I'm excited about that.
Nice. Actually sounds like you use some of the concepts from the book in creating the book.
Absolutely.
There you go.
Yeah.
So that's a good recommendation. Okay, so let's get into this. So the name of the book is The Intentional Engineer, which I personally think is funny because I am the epitome of the unintentional engineer. Back in the day, back when we still chiseled on stone tablets, I started studying civil engineering, and I left college, and I swore I would never do that for a living. And then, of course, I proceeded to get pulled back into it and develop my entire career around civil engineering. But the main concept that I got from Jeff's book, though, is that success can be achieved a lot faster and simpler if you approach your career with what Jeff refers to as intentionality. So Jeff, why don't you explain that concept to the listeners, right? What exactly do you mean by intentionality?
There's a lot of directions we could take with this. And by the way, if people, I just want to throw this out there at the beginning, that I've got a free corresponding workbook that people can go grab along with the book. They can go to theintentionalengineer.com/workbook and grab that. And that's free. you don't have to even get the book to grab that. It might be helpful. But the concept of intentionality is a powerful concept around what do you want and why do you want it, and let the purpose drive you. So we might talk about some comparative words that people might be familiar with as well. That purpose-driven approach. Are you driven by the purpose, the why? Start with why, which has been popularized by Simon Sinek. Another word that I might use in comparison is to be deliberate around how you are developing your life and your career. We don't want to only focus on your career and the success around how much money you're going to make or what title or position you get to or whatever. But we're trying to live a great life that we're proud of and that we find happiness and fulfillment in. And so we want to look at the whole picture of how do I find alignment in my life and my career so that those things align together to be mutually helpful, instead of the typical concept of like work-life balance, right? Then it feels like if I'm taking away from my work that I'm to give to my life, then I'm taking away from work. But we don't want to just be balanced, which means that we're completely static. We want things to be aligning so that they mutually work together in a better way. So I like that concept of alignment, but intentionality is really around what do you want and why do you want it, and let that be a driving force for then what do you do to go make that happen.
Nice. I like that. So Rocker, talking about intentionality, right? Do you see that concept as something that's, kind of adaptable to the way we work? I think more at the company level, right? Rather than personal here at Zentech?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you'd say, what do you want and why do you want it? I mean, I think about the work that we do, and for me personally, I think about the work that we do and the kind of work that and I guess the kind of work that I like doing, right? I mean, I love learning about people and the kind of work that they do. I've always had a passion for that. It's very exciting to get on calls and to learn about people's issues and how we solve them, and how they're doing. I mean, we work, as you guys know, architecture to engineering to construction, and just to see how they all work and their challenges, their pain points, how we help them out. To me, I enjoy that, and I think that's an important part of having that balance. It's not just about working because I have to. I mean, you have to find enjoyment in it.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And I kind of approach the same way. And I think that's how we kind of started Zentech, right? Without the benefit of Jeff's book, unfortunately, would have helped at the time when we did it. But the idea of, going into a business because it was something to do something that we wanted to do on a daily basis, rather than just like, hey, here's a way to make some money. Because, believe me, unless you're Rocco, you're not making a lot of money here at Zentech. The rest of us are living human lives. All right. So one of the concepts that I think Jeff hits pretty heavily on in his book is the idea of your personal mindset. All right. And that while you can't always control the situation or the environment that you find yourself in, you can certainly control how you respond to it. In particular, I was interested by the idea of moving beyond strictly goal-oriented and instead kind of changing your mindset to focusing on even enjoying, right, the process that leads you to those goals. And I will say, I am guilty of being a very task-oriented guy, and I can fall prey to the negative mindsets, I guess, about kind of the day-to-day steps that go into achieving those goals. I can get kind of testy. So Jeff, you talk about in the book, the concept of upgrading your mindset, right? What exactly does that mean, and how do people even start moving in that direction?
Yeah, this is so critical. And James, we can work on this if you want to really like.
There you go. I get my own personal consult. I like it.
Maybe we should have some extra conversations around that if you really want to work on it. But the thing is, so often when there's any change that we want to make in our lives, whether that's a career shift or a health change or something like, choose any significant change we want to make. So often we focus only on what we need to do differently instead of thinking about who do we need to be differently? How do we need to show up? And how do we need to think differently? Okay. And that's where the mindset comes into play, because we would say that our mindset drives our behavior and our actions that we take. And then our behavior and actions drive the results. So if we're only prescribing when we want to make a change, we only prescribe all the actions and behaviors that we need to do differently, we're actually neglecting the mindset. And that's why so often our mindset is left behind. So then our actions and behaviors go right back to how they used to be. They're not a sustainable change. We may do something for a little while, but we haven't actually changed how we're thinking about the entire shift and the process that we need to make. And whether that's an identity shift, like, hey, I believe I am something different now than I used to, right? I am someone moving from a change, like a frontline engineer to an engineering manager. You have to make some significant shifts around how you think about the value that you deliver in your role. Someone who is believing that or wants to improve their health, right? Want to lose some weight, you can focus only on, okay, how many pounds have I lost or whatever, or changing your mindset around, I am a healthy and fit person. Let's let that drive the choices that I make around what I eat and the type of exercise and the rest I get and the other things that you might want to change, right? And so you have to do both of those together. So there's a process, and I write about it. I spent 2 whole chapters on the book on the concept of why changing mindsets is important and then how to do it. We could go as deep as y'all want to and what that process looks like. But at the beginning right now, I just want to think about, without shifting how you think about the change, whatever that is that you want to make, you are unlikely to be successful in sustainably making that change. And that's on an individual level. By the way, that also applies to a group or an organization or a team, that often teams get embedded with a mindset of, this is how we do and this is how we've always done it. We say, hey, we need to change and do something differently. And people dig in their heels like, no, that's not the way that we operate or we want to operate, because that's what they're used to. They need to shift the minds, not just declare the new actions that you're going to take. So looking at that holistic piece so that we can really make changes sustainable and lasting and impactful to get the new results that we're looking to make.
Nice. And I'll say, I noticed you've said it a couple times here, and you definitely hit on it in the book, right? Even though the book is focused on engineering, as it says in the title, I was surprised, right, that you have quite a lot to say about the use of mindsets in your personal life, right? And I think that's important, because I don't think that you can adjust the way you approach work if you can't adjust the way you approach your life. So kind of staying on that topic, right? What are the biggest benefits, and I guess what are the biggest struggles that you've seen your clients face when they're trying to adjust the mindset, particularly for their personal lives?
Yeah, so give one example. Well, I'll give you a few. So one of the specific mindset concepts that I teach in the book actually comes from an organization called the Arbinger Institute. Make sure I reference them. And they call it the inward versus the outward mindset. And you think about it on kind of a scale, but an inward mindset is pretty self-focused. We're focused on ourselves and what we care about and what we're trying to accomplish. The opposite side is an outward mindset. Instead of kind of seeing people self-focused and where we'd say we see people as objects we can use in some way, or they're just in our way or obstacles. The outward mindset suggests that we see people as people that matter like we matter, right? And so that particular mindset is hugely impactful in how we approach our relationships. It's a huge impact from a workplace setting, because if I only see people that I work with as people that are going to help me get my tasks done, right, then it's a really transactional relationship, and people can tell that I don't really care about them. I just care about what I want from them, right? And that comes across, and people are less likely to really engage and be vulnerable and collaborative with you or with me. But the people that I notice that are the most outward, and you think about the leaders that I've had and stuff that really I can tell care about me and what I'm trying to accomplish, right? Then I want to go slay dragons for them when I work with those people, because I can tell that they care, they have my best interests at heart, and they're trying to support me. Now, obviously, this concept translates really well and really importantly to a personal life with spousal or partner relationships, relationships with your kids, or friendships or community work that you might do, right? Because if I've got 4 young kids we were talking about before we started recording. If I only see the tantrums, or when they are up in the middle of the night or whatever, and all those things, and I only see them as like these little kids, they're out to get me, to keep me from sleeping a wink for the rest of my life, then my relationships with my kids are going to struggle. If I only see my lovely wife as someone who takes care of certain home responsibilities, or or the division of responsibilities that we've decided, and that's the only value that I see out of her, then that's not really going to go over great. But if and so I use, actually, in the book, some stories about myself where I struggle at times being really present. It's really easy for me to be distracted when I'm with my family, and devices and stuff don't help, but sometimes just the weight or the struggles or the stresses of life and work and other things, and it's sometimes quite difficult for me to just be with my kids or be with my family. And my wife's really good about sometimes say, hey, Jeff, like, be with us. And that's a reminder that I need to make that shift. And that can happen in a moment where I'm like, hey, I'm going to decide to do this. I'm going to put the phone down, and I'm going to, just play with the kids, get on the floor with the baby, and roll the ball back and forth, or whatever else is going on, instead of being so caught up in the stresses and other things that I'm thinking about. But on a larger scale, I'm looking to continue to improve. How do I practice that more and more? How do I continue to remind myself of the value that I give to these relationships and what's important there? It's one of the most fun things, guys, is usually people are coming to me to solve some sort of career issue or work issue. But when I have people who tell me that, hey, my spouse said I've changed, they notice a difference in me over the last few months since we've been working together. That sort of stuff is super fun. And I love hearing stuff like that. I had another guy, and I think I wrote about the book. He's like, I feel like I'm a better human now because of the way that I'm approaching these things, because of the mindset shift and the way he's seeing people and showing up with people, and sees that he really cares about others instead of just showing up and taking care of what he needs to take care of. So this stuff is huge impacts for us at work, and certainly at home in our personal lives.
Nice. And you know what I got out of all of that, Rocco? You need to change your mindset and be more aware and nicer to your brilliant and amazing business partner, is all I'm saying. That's what I heard.
That's probably true.
There you go.
That's probably true. What did you get out of it, Rocco?
That's not important. Why are we asking him? All right, folks. Before Rocco throws me under the bus, let's take a break to hear from today's sponsors.
I need to process
that. All right, folks. When we get back, I want to get into some of the communication and skills-based functions that Jeff talks about in his book. All right, so we're going to get into that. So stand by, folks. We'll be back in just a minute with more of the Cattle Call Podcast. All right, everybody. Today's episode of the Cattle Call Podcast is brought to you by Zentech Consultants. That's Rocco and I. We're bringing ourselves to you. Aren't we nice? So we wanted to talk to you guys today about some of the things that we offer at Zentech Consultants. In particular, we wanted to talk to you today about our offerings around developing and upgrading your CAD standards. We are here to help you guys with all of your CAD standard needs, from ongoing drafting and design support to block and library development, full CAD standards development, right, CAD version upgrades, really whatever it is that you guys need when it comes to developing, implementing, and tweaking your current CAD standards. Or like I said, if you don't have any yet, we can help you build them from scratch. So Rocco, why don't you tell all the good folks how they can reach out to us and start that conversation?
Yeah, there's a lot of information, people, on our website, zentechconsultants.net. That's Zentek consultants.net. Or you can give us a call, 866-824-4459, or even drop us an email, sales@zentechconsultants.net.
Ooh, nice. CAD standards from Zentech Consultants. You're listening to the Cattle Call Podcast. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Cattle Call Podcast. We're talking with Jeff Perry today, author of the book, The Intentional Engineer. And in the first half of the show, we talked about intentionality and mindset. And in this half, I want to talk about the concept of genius zones, because I'm an arrogant SOB and I think I'm the greatest genius on the face of the planet. So I'm sure Jeff is going to be talking all about me. But seriously though, Jeff, you have an entire section of the book on discovering what you call genius zones. So what does that actually mean, right? What is a genius zone?
Yeah, great. And it's not just you, Jim, like being a genius all the time. It's a little bit different. It's us uncovering the things that make us unique, the things that we do about ourselves that are different. And so the first time I heard it came from a book called The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks, and he talks about 4 different zones that we can operate in. And I'll just reference these real quick. So zone number 1 is a zone of incompetence. Pretty straightforward. You're not very good at whatever you're doing there. Zone number 2 is a zone of confidence. This is a lot of us, and where engineers are so versatile in what they can do. They can do a lot of things really well. And so their zone of competence is pretty darn wide. But zone number 3 is a zone of excellence. This is something that you're very, very good at compared to most other people. And this is where probably a lot of people try and get to and maybe think that they're all the way there. But zone number 4 is what we're going to be talking about here. This is the zone of genius. This is where you're really in what we would call flow. That concept comes from an author and speaker, researcher, Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, if I'm pronouncing his name correctly. He passed away a couple years ago, written a few books on the word flow or the concept of flow, but you're taking advantage of your natural talents and doing what you earnestly enjoy. You kind of get into this space when you're in flow and when you're working in your genius zone where you're doing your best work. There's this balance of the challenge that you're facing and your skills and abilities to meet it. And you almost lose track of time because you're just sort of getting lost in the experience of it. It's so important to think about, how do we try and build our work and our lives to have more experiences of flow, because flow actually is a huge proponent to factors of happiness and satisfaction. But also from a work and career perspective, if you can be operating in flow and in your genius zone more often, that's where you're doing your best work, where you can deliver some huge value. When we talk about like 10x, people doing 10x work, like that's because they're working in their genius zones instead of getting stuck doing other things that may be in their zone of competence or maybe even excellence. But when we can get to more time spent in the genius zone, we're doing our best work. And so a couple ways to think about this. I already kind of talked about the concept of flow, where one of the models that comes from that concept, if you think about an XY diagram, on the x-axis, you think about the level of skills or competency that you have. And then on the y-axis, you think about like the level of challenge that you're facing. Well, if your skills are high, but the challenge is low, you're going to be pretty bored, right? Like, hey, I'm really good at this, but I'm not really being challenged. People get pretty disengaged and they're not having any fun, right? But if the challenge is really high and our skills are low, then we're kind of going to be in an anxious state. Like, hey, this is beyond what I'm going to do. But if the skills are high, your competency is high, and the challenge is high, then that's engaging, but you have the ability to rise to meet it. And that's where we kind of can find that concept of flow. But it's good for all of us to just kind of step back and think about, what are those things at work and outside of work and all aspects of my life that I experience that. And for some people, that can be sports or music or construction or making things. Or sometimes I've heard people like talk about like motorcycle or bike riding, and they just kind of get in this state, or exercising, and they're just like losing themselves in this experience. And what are the what are the aspects of the environment and the situation that help promote that? And how can we cultivate that more and more? Now, the other way to think about genius zones is looking at what are the combinations of talents, like kind of natural gifts, experiences that you've had over the course of your life, and also skills that you've learned over the course of your life. And when you combine those things make you unique, right? So just an example for me in the work that I do, I had experiences in, multiple engineering disciplines, mechanical and software. I interacted with civil and electrical engineers in some of the work that I did. So I had a pretty broad understanding of a bunch of different engineering disciplines. I had experiences and skills that I'd built in doing training and coaching work that I'd done internally to companies and done a little bit externally in career development. And then I had some natural gifts for asking great questions and some of that stuff, and some of that stuff I built. But that combination of things in the intersection of that, if you think about it like a Venn diagram almost, then at the intersection of that is, hey, me being uniquely qualified, different than most people, to do some of this personal development work for engineers and tech professionals. And so I get to work in one of my genius zones in the work that I do right now, which is super fun. I didn't actually know the concept of genius zones when I decided to do that, but looking back, I can say, yeah, I mean, that was part of that determination, right? So to use a fun word that I like, it behooves us to do some reflection and think about what are my genius zones, not just think about, well, I'm a genius and I'm good at everything, but what are the unique situations, environments, and activities that cultivated an experience in a situation where we can operate at our best level and deliver the most value and also find great joy and satisfaction in. And how can we do more of that? And it's good for us. It's good for our organizations that we're a part of. And it's good to be able to talk about that as well, to communicate that from like a personal branding perspective if people are trying to make career transitions or maybe trying to get a promotion or something like that, to be able to communicate, this is what I do really, really well. And if you can identify that and communicate that, you're going to have some sweet opportunities.
Nice. So I tell you what, one of the things that I really did like about this Genius Zone section in your book is that you don't just talk about like, hey, there's an ideal state. You actually talk about the challenges that most people face when they're trying to figure out like what zones they really are genius in. Look, like I said, a guy like me, I don't need that, right? I'm arrogant enough to believe I'm a genius in all zones. But I think it's important for a normal human like Rocco to know how he could become as awesome as I am. I'm just saying. So Jeff, what actually are the primary challenges that folks are likely to face when they're trying to unlock their own genius zones?
Yeah, so 3 specific ones that I've identified in the book on the chapter on genius zones. So number 1, it's sometimes hard to be objective about ourselves, right? And maybe you can think about this, Jane. Maybe that's hard for you, but it's hard to sometimes see the truth about ourselves at times. And so that objectivity, instead of us, puffing ourselves up just a little bit, sometimes that's difficult.
Yeah, but it's so much more fun when I puff myself up. I laugh.
It is. Yeah, I got you. So that's challenge number 1. And you're a great example of that. Challenge number 2, our environment sometimes conditions us in ways that are unhelpful for us to operate in our genius zones. When we think about the environment of the educational system, sometimes it's just like we need to do all the things, right? Then it sometimes suppresses our ability to really explore the things that we're really interested in and want to do more of. And sometimes we're influenced by family, community, and other societal impacts. Think about why so many kids want to be a firefighter, doctor, or astronaut, because, hey, like those are the cool things. Maybe more and more kids are learning how cool it is to be an engineer these days. A little more push on the STEM front. But there are a lot of roles that might exist that we don't even know apply to our genius zones or what that is, and maybe our our environment might not give us the opportunity to really cultivate those. And the third one is to think about, often we want social validation. And so sometimes operating in our genius zones means we have to be different than others and communicate how we're different and do things in a different way because of how we operate differently. I think especially about like neurodivergent people with ADHD. I have some friends who do coaching for people specifically who have ADHD and stuff. And, they have some extra special traits and talents that they can do really, really well. There are some challenges to that, but if we can help them optimize for where they can be in their genius zones, they can, just blow some of us out of the water with what they can do. And it's pretty impressive. So, of course, everyone wants to be liked and accepted, but we need to try and have the courage to say, well, this is what I really want to try. This is what I want to do, and be willing to go after that and do the work that it is, because it does take some cultivation and some time and an effort to discover and cultivate those skills that get us into a genius zone state. So those are just some of the challenges and roadblocks we might face.
Nice. All right, so Rocco, look, we didn't have Jeff's guide when we started Zentech, but we did spend a lot of time, right, seriously discussing our own skills and our own shortcomings, before we took the leap as business owners in this space. Do you think that was an important part of the success we've seen?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I think you have to understand your strengths and your weaknesses, and we saw, I saw Jim's strengths as my partner. When I thought about partnering with him, right, and I think he saw my strengths, and I think in a lot of ways our strengths complement one another. Of course, we both have weaknesses, but I think our strengths for sure complement one another, and I think that's important, because it's not easy to grow and build a business alone, let alone in a partnership. So I do think so.
Yeah, I agree 100%. So I mean, I don't think any worthwhile process, whether it's a business or anything else, comes without, right, some solid planning and a good bit of effort, right? And I will say that Jeff doesn't shy away from talking about that in this book, right? There are some great sections on the very specific skills that you're going to need to develop in order to enhance your intentions. And again, these are not, they're needed not just for the career path, but for the personal path as well, I think. And I think Jeff did a really good job of laying those out for you in these books. So let's talk about those a little bit, Jeff. What are the key skills that people need to kind of go down this path, and how can they learn or enhance or even begin to understand what they need from those skills?
Yeah, Jim, I want to talk about that, but can I just back up? Did you just admit to having some weaknesses? Did I hear that? I just want to.
Oh man, and it's on record now too. Damn.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure we got that straight and we solidified that for just a moment. Anyway,
I thought I made a mistake once. Turned out I was wrong.
Yeah, good. Yeah, well, so I left this because I talk about a lot of the big higher level principles, and there's a lot of invitations to actions. At the end of every chapter, I have a section called Take Intentional Actions. There's some actions and activities that you can do to cultivate whatever trait or principle that I'm talking about in all the chapters. The last chapter, chapter 8, I talk about these skills that you're mentioning that really support our intention, and there's 4 that I've called out, and we could add more, but these are the 4 that I identified that are quite important. So communication, accountability, feedback, both giving and receiving, and strengthening relationships. And as you said, all of these have impacts in the professional and the personal realm. And so just to call out a couple, I actually want to talk about the last one first, the strengthening relationships. Now, one of the things that I'm really passionate about, last year, almost a year ago, this was May 2023, the U.S. Surgeon General put out a significant advisory talking about, it called out an epidemic, really, of loneliness and isolation on the social front. And this is because our level of the relationships we have and the social interactions that we have has gone significantly down. And that's kind of ironic because we would say that we are the most connected technologically time that has ever existed on the planet. And yet socially, we're perhaps the most disconnected socially and emotionally. And it's really sad. And there's a huge social and health component where people who are lonely and isolated, from a mortality rate, it's equivalent to like smoking, 15 cigarettes a day. It's huge when people are feeling quite lonely. But also there's an economic component where, like, we're talking billions of dollars. One study estimated that just absenteeism, people not showing up to work due to loneliness, was estimated to cost employers just in the U.S. $154 billion a year. So it's huge, right? Oh. In terms of some of this stuff. So our relationships matter, and how we cultivate those relationships of feeling connected at work. This is an all hands on deck situation. Like, we need to have our work and our professional settings be cultivating friendships and connections where I establish those really positive working relationships, but also the personal life and the community and our families and the other realms of life where we need to be strengthening those relationships, because there are other studies that point to that it's not that it's actually the best thing you can do for your health and your life satisfaction is the quality of relationships more than anything else, like far and away. And then I'll just talk about briefly the concept of communication. And remember that we need to have communication both on the sharing, what we share, what we say, and also just expressing great listening skills. I love the quote, and I quoted it in the book. This is from Ernest Hemingway. When people talk, listen completely. Most people never listen. And so if we can cultivate, we need to be able to articulate ourselves well, but if we can step back and really listen because we care about people and show them that and listen at a higher level, that's really going to help us grow those relationships that I just talked about, as well as really listen to understand what needs to be accomplished as we're collaborating and working with each other. So that's just a couple of specific things to pull out there.
Nice. All right. So as always, I like to give guests a chance to tell us something that I didn't think to ask about on this show. And in this case, I also want to make sure I give Jeff a chance to plug his book one more time and to tell everybody where they can get their copies. So Jeff, what else do you want folks to know about intentionality in your book?
Yeah, so I mentioned earlier, and I'll just throw it out again, you can get a free copy of the corresponding workbook that corresponds with the book at www.theintentionalengineer.com/workbook, and you can find more information at theintentionalengineer.com on the book. The book can be found on Amazon and Audible, and should be able to be shipped to you. But I really just hope that people take this concept seriously. Why do you want to just let your life happen to you instead of being intentional about the life and the career that you want to create? And I know that's possible, and I've seen it over and over and over again with the people I've worked with. And so I hope that people will grab the book, but then if they want some extra help, can reach out to me. I've got some programs and coaching for individuals and groups that can really help you say, hey, I want to be intentional. Let's pull out what those intentions are and create a plan and a support structure to help you go achieve things that perhaps right now you don't think are possible. So I'd love to help anyone who would love to. You can find more information on me at jeff-perry.com as well.
There you go. Nice moral takeaway from today. I agree with you on that one. All right. So with that, folks, we are going to get out of here. But before we do, I just want to say, Jeff, thank you again for being here. It's always a pleasure to have you on, and appreciate you sharing your book with us.
Absolutely, guys. Always a pleasure. And thanks so much for having me.
All right. Thank you, Jeff. All right, folks, we're going to bounce out. We'll catch you next time on the Cattle Call Podcast. All right, everybody. Today's Cattle Call was brought to you courtesy of Zentech Consultants. That's Rocco and I. Zentech Consultants works with design and manufacturing firms to help our clients purchase and implement the software that they need in these complex industries. We provide a single point of contact for clients to buy, develop, and learn the most vital software systems for your specific needs. Zentech strives to be your trusted technology partner from your initial needs all the way through long-term support and training for your entire staff. So Rocco, why don't you tell them how to reach out to Zentech?
All right, yeah, you can reach out to us through zentechconsultants.net. You can email us at sales@zentechconsultants.net, or you can even call us 866-824-4459.
Excellent. We look forward to hearing from you all.